Hi, it's Paul Maunder from Production Expert. In this video, I'll be demonstrating a straightforward audio post-production process for a short corporate video. We're going to start in Adobe Premiere, export it to Pro Tools, work on it, and bring it back in. So I've got the sequence here. First thing is to actually export this in a format which is compatible with Pro Tools. So I'm going to go to the File menu, Export. Now I have a couple of options. OMF or AAF. OMF, Open Media Framework, was an older file interchange format. It'll still work, but for the best compatibility, I would recommend using AAF, Advanced Authoring Format. And this is going to export the audio timeline from Premiere in a format which is recognizable by Pro Tools and a series of other DAWs. Just a few settings to check before we proceed. The sample rate is good at 48 kHz, 24-bit. With the audio files, they can either be embedded within the AAF or they can be separate. For the sake of demonstration here, I'll do them separate, but if you did want it to be nice and self-contained, one file, then you could make it embedded. And everything else is probably okay. Broadcast WAV. With the render option here, you can either copy the complete audio files or trim them. The problem with copying all of them is that if you, for example, used a 1-minute segment of a 10-minute or 20-minute interview, you're going to end up with the entire thing, which we're not going to need. So we're going to trim them. But so we have some leeway, we can add some handles, which are measured in frames. This is a 25 frames per second project, so I'll just leave it at 25, which means 1 frame of leeway either side, so I could retrim the clip out one direction or another. This is all okay, and we're going to click OK, choose where we want it to go. I'll just drop it on the desktop. This is called Noah's short version. So click Save, and now it's exporting the AAF, and we'll come back in a second once that's done. Okay, I've got the AAF. There it is. If we have a look at the file size, it's small, 3.2 megabytes, because in this case, I opted for the separate audio. So here's a folder containing that audio. So assuming Pro Tools is the default application for opening AAFs, you would double click it, or if you want to check, you could always right click, open with, and you can see Pro Tools is the default. So let's just open this. It will open as a session. So I'll just call it Noah's short, let's put short version mix. And then let's just check the settings here. WAV, 48 kHz, 24-bit. On my system at the moment, there's a bit of a bug where the I/O settings don't always come up. I think it's something to do with this version of Pro Tools. Ordinarily, that would actually be available, so we're just going to have to work around it. Let's choose Create, and I'll just drop this on the desktop for now. Save this. Okay, here's a list of everything in the AAF. You can see we've got a video track, which isn't actually there. If you try and import that, it'll just open a placeholder track that isn't really actually viable video. So we're actually going to bring that in separately. We have all the different audio tracks here, and everything else is okay. We can bring in clip gain if it's there. Same with volume automation. Now I did do a provisional mix on this in Premiere just to get some rough idea. So I'll bring those in, but we'll probably end up redoing them from scratch. Let's just check one more thing actually. Audio media options. You can either choose to copy from the source media, so it's not going to refer to it, but it's going to duplicate it, which is a good option because it means it'll all be self-contained within the session audio files folder. The other option would be to link to source media, but that's going to refer to those exported AAF files, and so there's always a chance you could move them or delete them and forget that Pro Tools is associated with them. So let's go with that option. We won't bother with the other two options for now, and then just click OK. And you can see Pro Tools isn't sure where these files are because of the fact that I exported them as separate audio files. So I'm going to choose manually find and relink, only because if I choose automatically find and relink, it's going to scan all of my drives, and there's a lot of data on these drives, so that could take a long time. So the more I can narrow it down, the quicker it's going to be. So manually find and relink, click OK. Where are the files? Well, they're on the desktop. So I'm going to go into the user folder, desktop, there it is. And we'll just select all of them, choose find links, find it with the default settings. Let's found them, commit links. Okay, everything's there. Now we can just play a little bit just to check it's actually working.
And then digital brands, and we combine these three things.
LUFS.
Yeah, that's all good. Next, of course, we'd need to import the video. I won't bother going through the export process from Premiere, but I have already done that. And here it is. So I'm going to drag this into the session video files folder. Now, it actually doesn't really matter where you reference it from. You can drag it in from anywhere. But just to keep things nice and tidy, I prefer to keep it in the video files folder. So let's drag that into the session. Where do we want it to be? I want it to be at the session start on a new track. There is no audio embedded in this file, but if there was, we could bring that in. In this case, though, there's no point. We've got it in the AAF. Okay. And let's put this at the top and just play a little bit, check that it's in sync before we proceed.
What it's managed to do is it's managed to put together.
Yeah, check a bit in the middle.
Fossil fuels anymore, so we need to create new revenue streams, we need to dig into new value pools and so on.
Okay, it's working. She's not actually visible on screen there, so it's not a very good sync check. Let's check this bit.
Very competitive in the market.
Yeah, and somewhere near the end.
And take a new...
Okay, that's all good. So now we can actually make a start. Before we really get into it, we need to first organize this a little bit better. Let's start with the music. So I'm going to create a couple of stereo tracks, call them music. And then I tend to use the object grabber for this. Draw around them like that. Hold down the control key to constrain the movement. And what that does is prevents it from accidentally moving left or right. Then I'll delete these tracks. So shift click the names of them, right click, delete. The dialogue on these tracks, I strongly suspect it's the same thing duplicated across two channels just because of the way it's been recorded, but we can just check that. So let's have a listen to the left.
What it's managed to do is it's managed to put together,
and the right,
in my mind, some of the...
Sounds the same, but we can absolutely verify that by first panning these centrally.
What it's managed to do is...
And then let's just play them both and flip the polarity of one of them. So there's various ways you could do this. I'm going to do it using the one-band EQ, polarity invert. Yeah, we've got nothing. Bypass.
My mind.
Yeah. Okay, so as suspected, it is the same thing duplicated. However, just in case there is some bit of audio which isn't a duplicate, and I might need to go back to it later, I'm not just going to delete this. Instead, I'm just going to hide it and make it inactive. And this is going to become my dialogue track, DX. Let's have a look at the volume automation. Minimal going on here. It's fairly consistent, but we'll still erase it and start from scratch. And at this point, I'm actually going to create a master fader. I tend to create the master faders and have them at the bottom of the session, and then solo the dialogue. Now, with any dialogue, there's not much usable stuff in the really low frequencies. So the first thing I'm going to do is add an EQ, and this is only going to act as a high pass filter at this point. We might need to do more later. So my preferred one is the FabFilter Pro Q4. And if you click and drag at the bottom end, it'll create a low cut like this. And let's change the steepness of this curve to 24 decibels per octave. The Q, if you option click it, it'll default like that to a default steepness. The frequency, well, let's play it. Usually I high pass it at, say, 90 to 100 hertz.
It's a food business with technology, and that's quite unusual because usually you have one or the other.
Yeah, maybe around there. So it's just filtering out any unwanted low frequency stuff, but it's not really going to eat into the dialogue very much. Now on the master fader, I'm going to reserve the first insert for something which I'll add later. You'll find out a bit later in the video. And importantly, on the second insert, I'm going to add a metering plugin. My preferred one is NewGen VisLM. And the process we're going to go through now is actually leveling the dialogue. Now you can do this manually, or you can do it a bit more automatically. Let's start doing it manually, and then I'll show you an alternative. So I'm interested in the short term at this point. I'm going to mix this as though I'm working to the EBU R128 standard. So let's just play this. But first, I need to check that the master fader is actually assigned to the correct output. There.
Noise specializes in architecture and
so it's quiet.
And then digital brands. And we combine these three things into a full solution that we provide.
Okay, seems reasonable.
Noise specializes in architecture and technology, and then digital brands. And we combine these three things into...
Ultimately, what we're going to do is level all of this dialogue, denoise it a little bit, add some compression, and by having the short term somewhere in the ballpark of what the integrated is going to be, for this type of content, at least, documentary or corporate video type of content, it usually ensures that the overall integrated loudness at the end does hit the target. So I'll just do one or two more clips. You can see visually, now we know where that is. You can see that this one's going to be quiet, so we might as well increase it straight away.
It's a food business with technology, and that's quite unusual because
maybe a little bit
usually
loud.
you have one or the other. What it's managed to do is it's managed to put together, in my...
The other thing with these is we have these little glitches at the start.
It's a...
You know, so you could probably put a fade in on that. In fact, let's just go back and do that on these.
No special.
And the same at the end here. Obviously, when combined with the music, some of these will be masked a little bit, but I still like it to be as clean as possible.
That we provide.
Okay.
It's a food business with tech.
And then at the end of this,
and the employees execute flawlessly.
Yeah.
And I think what we can do is actually give them a new opportunity to a new market.
Okay, add a little fade there.
a new opportunity to a new market.
You get the idea, and of course I'd go through all this and do that process. However, with something simple like this, where you've just got a single track of dialogue, you've not got multiple people talking at once or overlapping with each other, there is actually an easier, quicker way to achieve this. And we're going to do this as an ARA plugin. So if I click on the Elastic Audio / ARA selector on the track, we're going to choose DynAssist. This opens in this docked window at the bottom of the session. And maybe if I just close that plugin for now and the video window. DynAssist allows you to do various things. You can see we've got ride, which is the bit we're actually interested in, which is going to automate the level. In fact, this is already doing it to the previously used target loudness I've set, which is -23 LUFS, but you can set that to whatever you want. I'm not going to use any of the other modules. We do have a gate, we have a breath removal or reduction option, and sibilance. Now I think this is okay in terms of sibilance, so for this it's purely ride. Now actually, in this case, what I should really do is wipe out the clip gain on these bits, so let's just default these. In fact, I could do this more easily by Control-Shift-B to clear the clip gain, and theoretically that should all be now in the right sort of ballpark. So let's just close this window. Take a look at this LM.
Noah specializes in architecture and technology and then digital brands. And we combine these three things into a full solution that we provide.
Yep.
It's a food business with technology, and that's quite unusual because usually you have one or the other. What it's managed to do is
Okay, and quickly now I'm going to go through adding these fades.
So actually,
Like this. Sometimes it's possible the end of it may have been cropped in the edit. Let me just listen to the end of this again.
the organization.
It's okay, but maybe it would benefit from a longer fade. You can actually just trim it, which will extend the fade like that.
The organization.
it's a plug and play or a build brick by brick type scenario.
Now, if you wanted to do this more quickly, what you could do is you could select a batch of them and do Command F and actually do batch fades, which is a reasonable solution. You know, it'll apply the fades across all of them, fade in, fade out. Maybe don't bother with a crossfade. But personally, I prefer to do it manually because usually there's no absolute fixed fade setting that's going to be right. It depends on what you've got and how long it needs to be, and you might even need to change the fade shape sometimes.
It is built for scale.
On a clip-by-clip basis. So I'm just going to go through this. In fact, let's skip ahead to the point where I've done this. That's done. So now let's take a listen to some of the dialogue again and just make some decisions about what we might need to do in terms of noise reduction.
And technology, and then digital brands. And we combine these three things into...
Okay, it's good. You know, it's a decent recording, but there is some background noise. But he is in this kitchen environment, so it's not too bad. You know, it's explained by the fact that you can see him in shot there. Let's take a listen to another interview.
What it's managed to do is it's managed to put together, in my mind, some of the best.
Slightly cleaner, still some background noise though.
Integration we do, so there's not a heavy burden on their IT organization.
It's reasonably consistent in terms of the level of the noise.
We not have our main income from fossil fuels anymore, so we...
Okay, I'm going to show you a couple of options about how you could go about this. So let's start by just doing these first couple of clips. Going to go into the audio suite menu, noise reduction. I've got quite a lot of stuff, and you know, it depends on the project really, but usually my go-to starting point is Hush Mix. So let's actually just select this one, preview this.
Then architecture and technology,
you can reduce reverb,
and then digital
but there is
brands.
no reverb
And we
really.
combine these three things into
Noise.
a full solution.
In fact, you can solo the noise. There it is.
Technology, and then digital brands. And we combine these three things into a full solution that we provide. Then architecture and technology.
I'd say about 10 dB is pretty good. You can actually link these faders if you want to. So you could, for example, link noise and reverb. If you wanted them to be in a certain relationship to one another, you could move them like that. But reverb is fine, so let's just pull the noise down. And make sure that you create individual files. You could create a continuous file, in which case it consolidates it into one block. But for the versatility of being able to go back and change crossfades or retrim it at the edit point, it's useful probably to keep it that way, individual files. And then we'll just render this. In fact, actually, before we do that, I'm going to actually duplicate this main playlist. You can name it if you want. And I'm just going to go back to the original one. So now I've got essentially this DX.01, which is going to be a secondary kind of safety playlist. So if I mess up something with the noise reduction and I want to go back at any point, I can do. So I'm working with that backup in place. Okay, render this. Now you can see we've got a much larger waveform. Why is that? Well, let's just play it and take a listen.
Noah specializes in architecture and technology.
So the level still sounds the same, and what's actually happened here, it's factored in the DynAssist and it's rendered that into what we've just done. So you can now see the effect of that automated clip gain process combined with Unmix. Let's do another one of these.
It's a food business.
Okay.
It's a food business with technology, and that's quite unusual because usually you have one or the other.
Yeah, 8 to 10 dB. I'm happy with that. And just render it. So generally, there's no single noise reduction plugin which is going to do absolutely everything perfectly every time. So you do need to have a range of different options and tools. This one does a very, very good job, but occasionally it misses something. So as an alternative, let's try SpectraLayers. Now, if I right click, you can see we've got the ARA plugin, SpectraLayers, Edit. Ordinarily, if you click this, it's going to open the docked SpectraLayers window, but in this case, it brings up this notification about ARA processing. And this is because we've already got DynAssist on the track. You can only have one active ARA plugin at a time. So I'm going to actually just commit all of that stuff with DynAssist. Now that's done, we've got SpectraLayers open for this particular clip. There's lots of ways you could denoise this audio. You could use voice denoise, or you could choose Unmix Noisy Speech. I'm going to try that. With this, if you want to, you can preview the speech or the noise.
And I think what we can do is actually give them a new opportunity to a new market.
That's the speech, very clean, the noise. The way this module works, Unmix Noisy Speech, when you click Apply, is it separates speech from noise and it splits them onto their own separate layers. You can see them over here in this layers section, so we could isolate the speech.
And I think what we can do is actually give them
or the noise.
A new market.
Or we could just change the relative balance, so we could pull down the noise by a certain amount. Let's pull it down by 10 dB. Try that. You can see they have their own different colors in the spectrogram. So speech in this case is pink and the noise is yellow.
And I think what we can do is actually give them a new opportunity to a new market.
Okay, great. Let's just try this on one more clip. Right click, SpectraLayers, Edit, or choose Unmix Noisy Speech. Apply this. We'll get some additional layers at the bottom here.
So actually, it's a light integration we do, so there's not a heavy burden on their IT organization.
So for speed now, I'm just going to go through the remaining clips, either with SpectraLayers or with Unmix. I'm just going to reduce the noise and we'll come back shortly. Okay, that's now complete. So next stage is taking a look at some of the sound effects. Now these are already there provisionally, at least some of them are. We've got things like this for the lower thirds, which appear there. What are these other things on the other track? These look like they are something which has been captured at the time of filming. Yeah, okay, so that's just actual location audio. I'm going to put these onto two separate tracks. Let's make one, which is just called Sync, which is stuff that's been shot at the time. And then once again, I've chosen the object grabber. Seems to be some stray audio here at the end. I'm just going to delete that. Select them, hold down Control, drag them. You can see that stops the left to right movement. Select these tracks, right click, delete. This is also location audio. There might actually be nothing on some of these, if you listen to them. Because some of this was lifted from a promotional video which had no sound. So in actual fact, they don't matter. Although I'm not going to delete it, just in case there is something there. So I'm going to hide it and make it inactive. And now let's just see what this one is. Okay, so I might need to have a Sync 2 track actually for that, because it overlaps. Sync 2. Put that onto there. And then let's make a stereo sound effects track, but there's going to be more than one sound effects track actually. So actually I'm going to make 3 sound effects tracks. These are the pre-made ones, or the ones which have been added in the edit. Drop this onto SFX1. And there are certain things which would benefit from sound effects. So for example, let's just run this silently actually. You can see we've got bits where people are in kitchens. Somewhere in this, there's a close-up of someone cooking a burger. And so we would add sound effects. I won't go through that process now, but typically I use Soundly to find sound effects. So for example, I've already done a search here for that kind of thing. So it's like a burger cooking on a grill. Then you could either bring in part of it by selecting it and choosing to import it into Pro Tools like that. So for example, I wanted this bit, I'd place my cursor on the timeline, click import, and it's going to bring it in like that. Obviously that's in completely the wrong place. Or you could just drag the whole file and drag it into a track. So once again, let's just skip to a point where I've done that. Okay, so that actually turned out to be a very quick process, because in actual fact, the only section which I felt really needed sound effects was this bit. So here are some effects which I got from Soundly. You know, and when you combine that with the music, it'll sound good. So the final thing is to actually balance the music with this. You can see it's just completely flat at the moment. This is going to be obviously completely swamping the dialogue like this.
With technology.
So let's just make everything a bit smaller, apart from these tracks, which I'll just make larger. In fact, let's go with jumbo. And, you know, you can see this has been mastered very loud. So I'm actually going to clip gain this down as a starting point, maybe by 6 dB or so. Let's just do it on this one as well. And now I have a couple of options about how we go about this. We could do it in non-real time, where essentially we would play it. And you can tell that's going to be starting a lot quieter than that.
And technology, and then digital brands. And we combine these three things into a full solution that we provide.
And I want it to kick up at that point. One thing that I tend to do is, you know, I like to have the fade start just before they finish talking. So this is a weird little method that I tend to have. I'll make a selection just underneath the dialogue where I want it to start and finish, and then I'll move that selection down. Then I'll turn that up with trim, and then I kind of add in these breakpoints and delete these others. So I'm deleting those with the Option key. This is my method, but it seems to work.
A full solution that we provide.
You know, you can modify the slope of it.
A full solution that we provide.
It's a food business with technology.
However, we could also do this as a real-time process. So let's try that. I'm going to put this track into, let's go with latch mode. Open up the little floating fader. This is something where you probably want to have the scrolling mode set to continuous. Otherwise, you have to be manually moving the edit window around continuously. So let's do that and just run this and see what I can do in real time.
Provide.
It's a food business with technology, and that's quite unusual because usually you have one or the other. What it's managed to do is it's managed to put together, in my mind, some of the best categories of food and put them into a tech platform that allows the customer to do business very easy, and then the employees execute flawlessly.
And I think what we can do is actually give them a new opportunity to a new market. So actually, it's a light integration we do, so there's not a heavy burden on their IT organization.
It's a plug and play or a build brick by brick type scenario by being really super clever.
It is built for scale from the beginning. So we built all of the components within the system, from the way we do the architecture, the entire supply chain, and the branding methods and the whole marketing. And then we've adapted the technology to the food world. I think that's where there's a big difference.
It's a fact that our business is changing forever. So in 10, 15, maybe somewhere to 20 years, but we will definitely not have our main income from fossil fuels anymore. So we need to create new revenue streams. We need to dig into new value pools. And so
you can see most of this is fairly static. If you do press stop, you're going to end up with this little jump. One way around that is just to delete it. Let's just skip to this little gap here. If you don't want to have to sit through the whole thing, of course, you can just skip to the bits where you actually need to change the automation.
in a very specific way.
What we see now with this new setup that we have enabled for Q8 is that they can get very competitive in the market with their own operation. So they can cross-utilize their staff, their square meters, so they have no extra.
Let's reduce the level of that incidental sound there. And also I noticed some of those kind of whoosh sound effects are a little bit loud.
It's a light integration.
Let's actually just reduce those. They're all at a uniform level. What are they at? Minus 6.7, which is just what they happen to be at in Premiere. So let's just wipe that out, reduce it. Let's say minus, I don't know, minus 9.9, because that's what it ended up at. See how it sounds?
It's a light integration we do. So
that's better. And also I feel that the dialogue would benefit from a little bit of compression. My preferred compressor is the Pro Compressor, Avid Pro Compressor, but this needs to be done in conjunction with keeping an eye on the overall level here. So let's just solo this. I tend to have a knee of 5 dB. Remember, the knee is how hard or soft the compression is in terms of how it kicks in. So what you might call hard knee compression means there's not going to be any compression whatsoever until you hit the threshold. which is specified here. So in this case, minus 20 dB, it's going to be no compression. Then it's suddenly going to be 3:1 because we've got that set as the ratio. But you might prefer to ease into that ratio across a certain range, which is known as the knee. So I tend to have this around 5 or 6 dB. And this is very consistent, really, this dialogue. We're just adding this to provide that overall little bit of smoothing and kind of gel, as people like to say. So I'm just going to have it somewhere less than 3:1, I think. And then the threshold is really determined by how heavy it's kicking into the compressor. So let's take a listen to that.
It's a food business with technology.
See, that's probably heavier than we need.
Usually you have one or the other. What it's managed to do is it's managed to put together, in my mind, some of the best categories of food.
Keep an eye on the short term.
Put them into a tech platform that allows the customer to do business very easy, and then the employees execute flawlessly.
I think,
something I sometimes do, if I want to check that this is hitting the target, I'll actually select all the dialogue, solo it, and just do a provisional bounce like this, and that's going to actually scan through it and read this loudness, so it's minus 23.3. So in other words, if I set this to 2, and then I can check it again. Remember, this is just my method. There's probably a cleaner way of doing this. I'll replace that mix. Ultimately, we're going to overwrite that with the final mix. This is now, well, close enough, minus 22.9. That's good enough. So that's on target, which means the whole mix probably also is going to be on target. The final thing to do is just to automate this last section. So I'm going to do that. Once again, we'll do it in real time. Do it in latch mode. Probably don't need these tracks quite as big as that. This starts in a gap, so it's probably okay to be quite loud. Let's give it a go.
With the local restaurant on the street corners.
we will be having...
Okay, not that loud. Okay, that was a guess anyway, so let's just start it lower. And we could always open VisLM just to see what's going on while we're doing this.
Restaurant on the street corners.
We will be having in the future, I think, fewer customers to serve, but hopefully those customers will have larger basket sizes, and we will be able to live off.
Okay, that's mostly okay. Skip to this little bit where there's a gap in the dialogue and just ramp it up a little bit. Although we do need to get rid of that little glitch that happened when we stopped it. Okay.
Order what you need and it will be delivered to you.
Picking Noise as a partner has been a real dream, but
that's okay. Skip to this point.
And become the customer's choice and favorite.
If you're looking to digitalize your business, if you're looking to take...
And, you know, if we felt that was a bit much, I could always manually trim it down like this. That's one option. And then finally at the end, I'm just going to ramp it up a little bit.
And really become big on food, then Noise is for you.
So theoretically, that should hit or be very close to our target level of minus 23 LUFS. And we do have some leeway on this, so it's actually minus 23 plus or minus 0.5. But I prefer to get it within plus or minus 0.1. That's my personal sort of spec. So let's do a bounce. Noah's short version mix. Okay. I'll do it as an offline bounce. Okay, bounce this. Yeah, we want to replace the other one because that other mix was just for me to check the level earlier. And this is minus 22.8. That's pretty much good enough, but if you really wanted, you could turn it all down by 0.2. Also, I like to create a secondary louder version of the mix, which is better for viewing on mobile devices where you don't need to necessarily meet broadcast spec. If it's just for viewing, you know, within a corporate organization, you can definitely have it louder than minus 23. So I'm going to add, prior to the loudness meter, FabFilter Pro L2. So this is a limiter. And I don't want the output loudness to go above minus 1 dB. This is a true peak limiter, so it's going to factor that in. So that's the maximum. And we know that our mix came out at minus 22.8. Let's say I would like the mix to be minus 18 in this louder version. Well, I need to turn it up by 4.8 dB to achieve that. But turning it up here by 4.8 dB is actually going to create a version which will be 1 dB too quiet because of the fact that we've turned the overall output level down by 1 dB. So in actual fact, we need this to be 5.8 dB in this case. So before I bounce this, the final thing, this is actually a very good idea, you know, even if you're not applying any limiting. Although we are ultimately going to be bouncing to a 24-bit file, you can still add dither, which is 24-bit. And you might think, well, I don't need to dither 24-bit to 24-bit, do I? Well, in practice, it wouldn't really matter. But actually, Pro Tools being a 64-bit double precision floating point environment, as soon as you're making any changes to the audio, even if it was 16 or 24-bit at source, it's ultimately going to be within this much higher bit depth environment. So what you're seeing on the output bus isn't 16 or 24-bit. It's going to be much higher. So technically, if you really want to be pedantic and get things absolutely spot on, you should really add a 24-bit dither. So that's just going to prevent truncation of those lower level bits, which are very low in level. They're actually below minus 144 dB in 24-bit. So yeah, this doesn't really matter, but if you want to do it, do it. I tend to. And what dither actually does by adding noise at what we call the least significant bit or the lowest quantizable level is actually going to randomize the quantization distortion at those super low levels. Anyway, that's a bit overly technical. So now with that done, make sure I've got everything selected. I'm going to reset VisLM, and theoretically this should come out at minus 18 LUFS integrated precisely. We've got our dither, we've got everything set. Let's bounce. Short version mix, brackets, minus 18 LUFS, loudness units full scale. Bounce this. Let's see if I'm correct. The integrated is minus, oh, there you go. It is minus 18. I thought it was going to be minus 17.9. So that's absolutely dead on. Then you would simply take those mixdown files, drop them back into Premiere, put it on the timeline, sync it up with the video, mute the original audio, and that is the job done. This has been an extended video demonstrating a simple post-production process for a corporate video using a number of plugins which I tend to use on straightforward mixes like this. I hope you found this video useful. If so, please let me know in the comments and I can make some more content like this in the future. Thanks for watching.